to demonstrate for you how you can use the actions on your product images. When you open up an image, the first thing you want to do is determine what is wrong with the image. So for this image, it's slightly underexposed, which I can tell here in the histogram, and it's also a little bit too warm. So the first thing I'm going to run on this image is the perfect white balance. Now I noticed that this made the image a tiny bit too cool. So I'm going to pull down the opacity of this layer just a bit until I get it looking how I want it. Next, let's fix the lighting. I'm going to play light and bright base, which is going to give me an overall contrast boost and nice brightness. Then I'm going to paint off these shadows just a tiny bit. So I'm going to play the paint off shadows action. And I have my brush here, and I have it set to about 20% opacity. So I'm going to select my layer mask, and I'm going to paint over the shadowy areas of this image. And we just want to brighten this up a tad. And I'm going to paint over these shadowy areas right here. It's a really subtle difference, but you'll notice that it just kind of softens the shadows and makes them not quite so noticeable, so your eye isn't drawn just to the shadows. And next, I'm going to paint on pop. And what that's going to do is it's just going to paint a lovely bit of pop to your product or whatever you want to paint over. And again, I'm using my white brush at 20% opacity, so I can just gradually bring up the effect until I get it how I want it. And if you ever go too far in your effect, just change your brush color to the opposite. So this I was painting on with white, so if I wanted to brush off a little bit right here where it's a little bit too bright, I just press X on my keyboard, and that's going to change my active brush to black, and then I can just brush off over that, and then that just tones it down a little bit. So now I'd say the image looks pretty good overall. And so now I can add some finishing touches. And I want this image to have a nice, soft, kind of dreamy look. I want it to have a nice, soft, homey vibe. So I'm going to play the soft pink light action. And what that does is it just adds a nice, soft light to it. But I'm going to brush it off of the product because I really want our product to stand out. So using a black brush, I'm going to press 0 on my keyboard, which is going to bring my brush back up to 100% opacity. And I'm going to just brush off over the product. And now I think that's looking really good. So the very final thing I'm going to do to this image is play crisp finish. And this is one of the last actions you will ever want to run on your image because it's a sharpening action. So what it does is it just really makes the edges of your product nice and crisp. I'm going to bring it, and it's set at 50% opacity. So if the effect is too strong, just pull it down, or if you need more, just pull it up. We're going to set it about 75. You can see when I turn that off how it just sharpens up those edges. So let's see what I did here. So here was the before, and it was dark and the white balance was off, and here's the after. It's nice and bright and light, and your eye is drawn right to the frame image here. So let's go to the next image. Here's an image of an alligator. So there's a couple issues with this image as well. One, the white balance is off. Two, the lighting is a little off, and we have some color cast. There's a little bit of a cyan color cast and a yellow color cast here, probably caused from the lighting. And then there's also this background is a little dingy, so we're going to brighten it up. So the first thing I'm going to run on this image is the perfect white balance again. And I'm really just paying attention to my product here because I'm going to take care of this white background. And I think the product looks close, looks true to life to the colors that I took when I took this image. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play the Let There Be Light action. And this is just going to add a lot of light to the image. And I think that looks pretty good. And so now that the image is nicely exposed, I'm going to go back to the color correctors and I'm going to go to white and whites. And I really love this action. If you take pictures of products on white images, you're really going to love this. So I'm going to take this down to 30% opacity and I'm going to start brushing over the background. And you can see that it's just really whitening up the background and it's not affecting any of the colors at all. I'm brushing right over the alligator and it doesn't affect him at all. It's only whitening the background. And it also doesn't get rid of your shadows. The problem with whitening your background that most people have is they get rid of their shadows and then it just looks like your product is kind of levitating in midair. So that looks a lot better. So now the final thing I'm going to do is get rid of these color cast. So I have a yellow color cast right here. So I'm going to play Bye Bye Yellow. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller just to go over just this yellow. And if you want to know the shortcut keyboard, shortcut for that, it's just the right and left bracket tools. So I'm painting over this little yellow dot that showed up here. Now I'm going to paint, I'm going to play Bye Bye Cyan, and I'm going to get rid of these cyan color casts that were made under the alligator. And that looks better. So now this image could be done, but if I wanted to just do one more thing, I could lighten up these shadows and soften these shadows. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to play the Paint Off Shadows, and instead of just plain play like I did before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the alligator and then I'm going to play Paint Off Shadows. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I'm going to hard press on my magic wand tool here so I can select the quick select tool. And I'm going to take this tool and make sure that it's set to plus, so that means wherever I click it's just going to add it to the selection. And now I'm just going to pull over the alligator until he's selected. Now I'm going to press minus because I got some of these shadows here and I don't want those in my selection. And I'm going to go back to the plus because I didn't get all of his feet in the selection. So that was just a quick and easy way to select the alligator. Now I'm going to play Paint Off Shadows. And you can see that just lightened up the shadows under here. And if there's any edges that are a little bit too sharp and it looks not natural, you can take your brush, and I'm going to paint in black. So I pressed X on my keyboard. I'm going to paint over this layer mask, and at about 10% opacity, I'm just going to soften the edges here around the alligator. So the selection looks a little bit more natural. So there you have it. There's our little alligator, and let's just look at what we did here to fix him. So here is the before and here's the after. On this image, again, I have kind of a dingy background, and the lighting is a little dark. And then also I really want to make these, the stones and the metal pop. But this image has a really big problem. This necklace is actually like a pure silver color, but you can see from some of the reflections, there's a yellow color cast. I took this in a room that has a lot of wood, so it's reflecting the wood in the room where I took this picture. So I'm going to show you how we're going to go ahead and fix that. So the white balance on this image is pretty good other than that yellow cast. So I'm just going to play Bye Bye Yellow. And I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to take it, I know there's a lot of yellow in this, so I'm just going to go to about 40% opacity. And I'm going to brush over the necklace. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And the nice thing about, the Bye Bye Yellow, Bye Bye Red, it only affects the color if the color is there. So if you're painting over something, like I'm painting over this white background, it doesn't really do anything to the white background. It only affects the necklace here. So that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to play Light and Bright Base. And I don't like the way that made it look. So sometimes an action doesn't work, and that's fine. But the nice thing about these actions, all you have to do is delete the layer. So I'm just going to press delete on my keyboard and get rid of that. So since that one didn't work, but I know I still need some light here, I'm going to try the Let There Be Light action. Okay, and that looks a lot better. That gave a nice brightness to the necklace, but it didn't make it look so dark and contrasty. And then, so now I'm going to go to the white and whites, and we're going to whiten this background. And there is some white on this image in the actual product, so you do need to be a little careful when you have a product that has white in it, not to brush over it. So I'm not going to be quite as crazy when brushing over as I was with the alligator that was green. And you just keep making your brush bigger or smaller to get into any of the areas that you want to get into. But you don't have to be perfectly exact. All right, so that looks a lot better. And now I'm just going to play the Sparkle and Shine action. This is a great action for jewelry, and I'm going to use it over the gemstones to make them really pop. So I'm clicking on the layer mask here for the group. There's 3 different layers that make up the Sparkle and Shine. There's the diamond finish, the shine, and the sparkle. So you can adjust the opacity of each of these layers in the group if you find that the action is too strong, or you can adjust the overall opacity of the group. So I'm just going to worry about just these beads, and I really want to make them pop. So I'm just brushing over this necklace. And you can see as I'm brushing over it, the gemstones are really starting to pop. And I'll just show you how that changed it. So it really made it pop. So then finally, the last thing I'm going to do to this one is I'm going to play the crisp finish, which is going to add overall sharpness to the necklace. And I actually think that's just a tiny bit too strong, so I'm going to bring it down just a tad, since we already did some sharpening over the necklace with the Sparkle and Shine action. So then there you have it. That's what I would do to that to fix it. So let's just look at the before and after real quick. So here's the before and here's the after. And then one final image. So for this image, we have a background that is that we want to fix, and these colors are actually much brighter in real life, so we want to add some vibrance to these colors. So the first thing I'm going to do, because this is a little bit warm, these are more of like a purpley red color, I guess. I'm going to play the purple-white balance, or sorry, the perfect white balance. And I know that that made the background look a little weird, but the roses, the color of the roses, this is actually much truer to life. They're just a little bit more vibrant. And so I'm going to clean up the background with a different action. So I'm going to play Let There Be Light on this one, which is going to add some light. And now I am going to play the white and whites. And again, I'm using my brush, and I'm not, since these are red and the action won't affect them, I don't have to be quite as careful with my selection. So it just depends on what kind of background you're cleaning up. All right, so that looks good. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to soften these shadows a little bit. So I'm going to play Paint Off Shadows. And I'm going to bring my opacity of my brush down to 20% by pressing the 2 on my keyboard. And I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to paint over these shadowy areas, just so they're not quite as prevalent. Okay, so I'm liking the way this is starting to look, but the flowers are much more vibrant in real life, so I'm going to play the Paint Vibrant Color action. So I'm going to go ahead and press play on this, and I'm going to make my brush just a tiny bit bigger, and I'm going to put my opacity of this brush about 40% and just paint over these roses. And that's looking really good. Those colors are much truer to life of the actual product, which is important with products because you want the product to look the same on the screen as close as you can get to what your client is actually going to hold in their hand. So that looks pretty good. The final thing that is kind of wrong with this picture right here is you'll see that there is I was taking this on a board, and some of my table is there. So there's this little teeny tiny imperfection there. So I'm just going to show you how you can fix that. You just go to your original layer, and I'm going to use this lasso tool, and I'm just going to select it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to click Fill, and that just use Content Aware to fix that. And then I'd probably crop this, and it would be ready for Etsy. So let's just see the before and after on this one. So here's the before and here's the after. So that was 4 images and how I would edit them using the actions. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line and I'd be happy to answer your questions. I really hope you enjoy using the Photoshop actions. I really enjoyed making them for you, and I would love to see before and afters of your images. You can tag me on Instagram at MillieMay&Co, or you can email them to me, hello@MillieMay&Co.com. Bye.